Senator Van.
Thank you. Good to see you again, Ms Savage. Thank you for being here tonight. You'll remember at last estimates I had some questions that go to the transparency and accountability of AEMO. And I've got some similar questions for you tonight. Just for those following on at home, just to explain the alphabet soup that we'll be diving into. AEMO is the market and system operator, correct? The AEMC, the Australian Energy Market Commission, is the rule-making body, and the AER is the enforcement body, the Australian Energy Regulator. Am I on the money with all those three?
You are. So we do market monitoring, compliance and enforcement, and we're also the economic regulator of the monopoly infrastructure.
Excellent. Thank you for confirming that. Ms Savage, I'm concerned that AEMO have broken the national energy rules and the AER have waved that through and let that occur on two separate occasions. Are you aware of those two occasions?
I think you'd have to tell me what rules you think they've broken.
Okay, sorry. There'd be Rule 5.22.15c, where it says AEMO must consult on the new information and the impact on the optimal development path under the integrated system plan in accordance with consultation requirements set out in the forecasting best practice guidelines for an ISP update.
So I am aware of that. Thank you, Senator. Look, my understanding is that there was a letter to the Australian Energy Regulator twice, so once in 2021 and again in 2023, where there was a requirement for the Australian Energy Market Operator to update the ISP in order to undertake what's called a feedback loop. A feedback loop is... It might be me. No. A feedback loop assessment. And what a feedback loop assessment is when there's a large actionable integrated system plan project, so a large transmission project, the cost of that project when it's ready to come to us for approval has to be assessed by AEMO to make sure that it's still within the optimal development pathway. Now, the consultation requirements for an ISP update are actually less than the consultation requirements for the ISP itself. And so in developing a draft integrated system plan, AEMO has to develop the inputs, assumptions and scenarios report along with some of their methodology documents, and that goes through quite extensive consultation. And so on both of those occasions in 2021 and again in 2023, AEMO was about to release the draft ISP, and the consultation that they'd undertaken for that draft ISP was more than what they would have been required to do for an ISP update. And so in both of those occasions they wrote to us and said, look, we think that consultation process has been done, and we wrote back and said, yes, we acknowledge that you have done that consultation process, because to do it again would have been the same process essentially, but duplicative.
Well,
and it is within our right to do that under the law. And it is our guidelines that they would be needing to comply with.
But the difference between the draft ISP or final ISP and the IASR is that the IASR is modelling and consulting on inputs into the system, whereas the ISP is actually about the output. What is the optimal development path? They are two completely different things. So by waving through the rule where it says AEMO must consult, you're not letting consumers or any other market participants have any input on what the output of it is. Yes, they've done some consultation on the inputs, but that's a lot different to the output.
My understanding, and Ms Jolly might want to add to this, is that the consultation that's undertaken in the context of the draft ISP and in an ISP update would be on those inputs and assumptions and scenarios and the methodology, because what they're testing is whether or not in an ISP update the project continues to be consistent with the optimal development pathway, and how you would determine that would be through those inputs and assumptions. But did you want to add to that, Ms. Jolly?
Yeah, I think that's correct. Essentially, when going through that feedback loop process that the projects are trying to go through, they need to have reference to the most recent ISP or the ISP update, and they're trying to test, AEMO are testing, does the project still address the relevant need in that optimal development pathway? So the IASR report is directly going to that question, and also whether the cost of the project still aligns with the best way to meet that need. So all of those processes are essentially coming to that same point.
So then explain to me how, I'll just pick one example, Humulink, had a blowout in budget of over $1 billion. Is that correct?
So the current estimate of Humulink is, I think, $4.9 billion. That's correct. And its original cost estimate was 3.3 or something. Yeah. So yeah, it's certainly increased in cost.
And so to be on the optimal development path and to be a reasonable cost, and I should pause at this point and point out to those following at home that they are the ones that will be paying that $5 billion or $4.9 billion at the end of the day when you regulate that as Transgrid's part of their regulated asset base. So this is no small thing. This affects customers, all the time. And as we heard earlier, even some of this funding is coming from the Clean Energy Finance CEFC to seed some of this money. So we're talking about huge sums of money here that people have been denied a chance to have their say. Now, the 2024 draft ISP not only puts in that new cost, but somehow the net market benefit of that went up by, let's guess, same $1 billion. How can you not let people comment when things like that are sliding through?
So I think just to be clear for people who are following along, and I hope for their sake they've got something better to do tonight, but the difference I think is that in the input, so in an ISP update, for example, they're not consulting on the project, they're actually consulting on the costs and inputs and assumptions that go into determining the optimal development pathway.
They're also consulting on the optimal development pathway.
But not on the project. So it's not the consumers, because the way in which you would consult on the project itself is through the regulated investment test process, which is a separate process to this one that we're discussing. So there has already been, by the time you get to a feedback loop assessment, a multi-year regulatory investment test process where there've been a project assessment draft report, a project assessment conclusion report. There's been multiple stages of consultation with consumers, and that's the point at which that consumer input is taken. And then in the ISP context, there is a consumer reference group that AEMO uses, but that consultation is focused on inputs, assumptions and scenarios and methodology, and that would have been an identical and actually more comprehensive process through the draft ISP than you would have seen through an ISP update. So all we were doing is acknowledging AEMO's comment and saying to do it the same process twice at the same time would be duplicative. So if they were doing it a year apart, so if they'd been doing that in the off cycle of the ISP, absolutely they would need to do it, but doing the same process twice at the same time we consider to be duplicative.
But it's not. They're consulting on different things, and that's the. Well, it's still, the rules still say must consult. That consumer reference group didn't get consulted.
They did via the consultation that was done on the inputs, assumptions and scenario report and the ISP methodology. And
in both your letters, the 2021 and the 2023 one, you said that AEMO must notify stakeholders as well.
Yes, that's right.
And do you know for sure whether they did that or not?
I'll ask Ms Jolly if we know that.
Yes, they've made a publication on their website to notify stakeholders of that.
So that satisfies you as notification?
Yes, if they've notified on their website, yeah.
again, you know, I find AEMO opaque. There's a lack of accountability. As I asked the Minister at last estimates, you know, is there any plans to make AEMO more accountable and bring them here before the Senate estimates process? Now, if they had, if they were less opaque, you know, they would be seeking to be more accountable. Yet they're just continuing to be opaque, hiding behind things, and I find that AER not holding them to account more is kind of concerning.
Yeah. I mean, you might have also seen we just issued a transparency report into the integrated system plan and in the draft one, and we called out about 4 or 5 areas where we thought AEMO needed to do more work to make to increase transparency in the integrated system plan. Did you want me to take you through those, or are you familiar with that?
I'm familiar that they occurred.
An event.
That's fine. I'll leave it there and do the chair's, follow the chair's wishes and hand back the call. But thank you.